Hi everybody, I'm here today with Jamie. My name is Rachel. I'm the Ambassador Communications Officer at Teach First, and yeah, delighted to be joined by Jamie, who's the co-owner and co-founder of James Farm. Jamie, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and the training program you were on.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. My name is Jamie Feilden. I'm the co-CEO and co-founder of Jamie's Farm. I've been working full-time on the charity for around 13 years now. I was part of the '03 cohort, so the very first year of Teach First. And so the 20-year anniversary is sort of even more significant, I guess, for us, because it's 20 years on from when we started the program.
Yeah, definitely. I guess with that in mind, obviously, as you say, you've done a lot in that time with obviously the farm. Do you want to take me through a bit how you started obviously on the 2003 training program, like how you kind of came about finding it for a start, and then, you know, your journey sort of through teaching and now obviously the kind of where you're at with the farm?
Sure. So, yeah, I was studying at Edinburgh University and through a friend heard about Teach First. I wasn't massively in the market for graduate recruitment programs. I hadn't really decided what I was going to do. I thought I might go into international development, but heard about Teach First, thought it sounded pretty exciting, not least with the fact that it was the first ever year, and something new and fresh and interesting, and that it was sort of sold as a very major challenge, if you like, which it certainly turned out to be. So I suppose around the time of finishing my finals, I travelled all the way down to London from Edinburgh, wearing a pretty shoddy suit, and went to Canary Wharf, and was interviewed by someone called Nat Way, who was one of the founders of Teach First. And had this kind of really inspiring day, meeting other candidates, meeting the staff of Teach First, and was super excited when a couple of days later I got an offer. I then went to Summer Institute, which in those days was in Canterbury, met some lifelong friends, and had a really exciting first summer with Teach First, and was then sent to work in a school in Croydon, Hayling Manor, where I taught for 2 years, and really came up with the idea of Jamie's Farm. My kind of reflections on being in that environment led me to establishing the charity. I left the school and went to work in the HQ of Teach First, which in those days was still in Canary Wharf. So worked in, I think it was the 49th floor of Canary Wharf, and worked in graduate recruitment for 3 years. And ended up with the wonderful title Head of Attraction. So my job was managing all that went on campuses. So we had a team of 7 wonderful ambassadors who went out there, found people, persuaded them away from other courses, and brought them into Teach First. And so that was really exciting, I found. And then during that time was piloting Jamie's Farm, and come 2008. Left Teach First to go and work full-time on Jamie's Farm, and it's grown from there, really.
Yeah, so I guess I was curious to know a little bit more about how you came up with the concept of Jamie's Farm. You said that you kind of came up with the idea while you were like training, is that right? Tell us a bit more about the journey of kind of how that came about.
Yeah, so I suppose, as with probably all participants, the early days in the school were a real shock to the system. It was quite a tough environment to go into. I reflected a lot on what barriers there were to learning, really. The fact that a lot of the students weren't really learning a huge amount, that the school was a dangerous place for pupils and teachers, that it wasn't a kind of collaborative, thriving institution as it should have been. So I just reflected on how I could use some of the advantages I'd had growing up in the countryside, some of the experiences I'd had, to focus on changing the behaviour of those students. So ways that they could come into a totally different environment, and feel enriched, feel challenged, and have the ability to reflect, and then hopefully go back to school and thrive. I wrote this kind of, you couldn't call it a business plan, but a couple of pages on it. So in those days, there was something called the school project competition. So I wrote down the idea, and then really started piloting it very early on. And we saw success from the first visit. We made a film of the first visit, and 13 years on, we've got 7 farms and we've worked with 13,000 students. So the interesting thing about that is that the concept, the kind of farming family therapy that we launched with, has remained absolutely core to what we do now. And the fundamentals of Jamie's farm remain very similar to where they were back in 2006 with the first ever visit.
I think that's amazing, the fact that you came up with the idea that early on and really like ran with it. And you said obviously that you'd grown up in the countryside, so you know, I'm right in saying that was Bath, which is where obviously you've got the first farm, the kind of the one that you kick-started with, and then others are around the country, sort of some in the Midlands and then elsewhere as well.
So yeah, the first farm was here in Bath, and that's where I am today. That's where I spend most of my time. The second one was in Herefordshire. The third one was just inside Wales in Monmouthshire. The fourth farm was in Lewes in East Sussex. Around that time, we took on an urban farm in Waterloo, which we're still running. And then last year, we took a lease on a farm in Skipton in Yorkshire. And we're now in the process of purchasing the neighbouring farm here in Bath, which will run as a second hub within this valley. So a bit of geographical spread, but quite a lot of focus on the kind of southwest and Wales at the moment, but looking maybe to take that further afield and build hubs around the east and the north as well.
Yeah, and that's amazing. I think the fact that obviously you're building these up at a time where, you know, it is difficult, sort of farming, it's difficult in education, like marrying these two and making a success of it is very impressive. Appreciate it's not necessarily fully focused on traditional farming from that point of view, as you said, like farming family therapy, get my teeth in there. That is obviously the concept that's been from the beginning until kind of now. What does that actually mean, I guess, like for students, for teachers kind of coming on site? Like, what do they do? What's kind of like a day or week in the life of?
Good question. So, I mean, a lot of the program is led by the farm. So the farms are not petting zoos. They're real working farms with lots going on. There's lots of animals to look after. Here in Bath, we've got over 1,000 sheep. We've got 120 cattle. We've got pigs, we've got ducks, we've got chickens, we've got horses. All of those animals need looking after, need nurturing. And there are real jobs that have to happen to keep those animals alive. So the kids are kind of dragged into that process. But I suppose the day to day is really kind of driven by what it would be like to almost be part of a farm 50 years ago, if you like. So people sharing in cooking, in harvesting vegetables, in looking after the animals, in taking care of the environment, whether that's tending to the flower beds or making sure things are tidy. So everyone's sort of dragged into this kind of living, working organism. And in between all of that hard work and momentum and focus and satisfaction that comes from those jobs are peppered with kind of more therapeutic activities, which involve reflection on your own behaviour, perhaps, but also on others, supporting and challenging each other, and really reflecting on the difference of how these children manage here on the farm versus how they manage when they go back to their homes and schools and wherever they come from. So there's this kind of therapeutic work peppered throughout the experience. And then just the family thing is the kind of thread that runs through everything. You know, that's we keep our group sizes quite small. So generally there are 12 children here on the farm, and that allows for the children visiting plus the staff that work here and the staff that visit with them to sit around one big table and operate like a family. And the element I didn't mention, which has become more and more developed over the years, is legacy. So we're very committed now to ensuring that this isn't a one-off experience that gets lost. we're very committed to the idea that this is something where the change is sustained, and that we're a catalyst here on the farm to allow a change to begin that is then followed up and developed further by the teachers that visit with the kids. So it's kind of it's a lot on them, but supported by us to make sure that the change is long-term sustained.
No, that sounds really, really interesting. And like, I've been one of the fortunate people to come down and like see the farm in action and see, as you say, like all sat around that table, feeling that kind of community feeling and allowing, I guess, you know, the students to really open up and as you say, not just do the hard work, but, you know, look inwards and understand kind of what's kind of good about themselves, what also, you know, they might want to challenge about themselves. So yeah, I think it's just really important to kind of highlight those elements. And I guess what I'm interested in particular is the fact that, as you say, it's bringing students into a farm environment, in a rural environment, which presumably a lot of them won't have had that experience, you know, before. Like, what is it about that kind of, I guess, potentially motivates you, like, and obviously supporting like children from disadvantaged communities, like, yeah, like how have you kind of brought those two elements together and allowed that support? And
so I suppose, I mean, the children that come invariably come from urban environments. So some would come from more rural environments, but generally they're coming from urban environments. I think certainly my view is that there's something very special about a farm in terms of beauty. You know, we only have farms. We've chosen our farms for the beauty of the buildings, of the surrounding landscape, of nature, the opportunity to connect with nature, of, you know, there's beautiful woodland, there's rivers, there's, you know, fantastic landscapes, there's mountains near all of our farms, those kind of things, you know, so a real amazing opportunity there. But I do think the working farm element is really, really important. So the kind of, you have to milk the cow first thing if you want a bowl of cereal, because there ain't going to be no milk, or you have to go and harvest the vegetables for your lunch because otherwise there will not be a lunch. So getting people drawn into that, and I think that it's become harder and harder for children and adults in the country to find opportunities to do tangible physical tasks. And I think there is huge satisfaction and benefit to getting involved in physical tasks, seeing the result. There's great satisfaction from that, whether that's digging a vegetable garden, chopping logs, shifting hay bales, chasing some cows along a field, whatever it is, or feeding the animals in the morning. I think there's huge satisfaction, and there's even more benefit to that when you do it as part of a team. So a lot of our stuff could only happen if people work together. So we're kind of teaching teamwork through the activities as well. But I really hope that basically what it does, because obviously they're not going to go home and get up and chop logs in the morning necessarily or whatever, but it gives people a taste of what hard work, collaboration, teamwork, focus, etc. can bring. And once the children have had that taste, hopefully they find other ways of continuing that, whether that's through engaging more with school, or taking up a sport, or just taking a bit of exercise, or helping around home, or cooking a meal. You know, there's lots of things that you can translate it into, other opportunities to find satisfaction and build self-esteem, if you like, when the kids go back.
Have you got any like anecdotes or examples of kind of the differences that you've seen of students when they're there, but also I guess like any feedback you've had from when they have returned to the classroom and like perhaps become more engaged with other students or with their schoolwork, or like outside of school? Have you got any kind of things that you can share about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got hundreds, if not thousands, of great case studies of kids who've really thrived, who not always necessarily the ones that you imagine or go back and make a shift. But we get lovely kind of letters from, we had a letter from a young lady in London who had who'd actually had her own family. So she was here right at the start. So she was maybe 16 when she came 12 years ago, and she wrote to us about how she'd now had children, and how with her children they always eat around the dinner table, and that was thanks to Jamie's Farm. So the idea that we'd kind of had an impact on her parenting was really exciting. We've got an ambassador, a young guy called Jack, who grew up in care, who came to the farm every summer through a foster care respite organisation, and at age 17 applied to be an apprentice, came and worked with us as an apprentice, really thrived in this environment, and he's actually back here working this week and for the next 3 weeks, supporting our programme. So, you know, and he just cites Jamie's Farm as the thing that shifted the tracks, the thing that really allowed him to kind of work out and reflect on his own behaviour, how he treated others, and make a shift in a much more positive direction. And you know, and it was always our dream that some of our beneficiaries would become part of our staff, and that's definitely happening, and it will happen more and more and more.
You mentioned there obviously about ambassadors. Presumably you mean the Jamie's Farm ambassador.
Yes, yes.
But I guess you're also like had huge support from the ambassador community, in terms of there are various ambassadors that work with you at Jamie's Farm, and yeah, who I guess probably have helped support over the years and work with in terms of like school partnerships and everything. Like, what does that kind of being part of the ambassador community mean to you? Like, how have you kind of collaborated with others? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I'd say around a quarter of our staff are Teach First ambassadors. So it's been really great for us to continue that link. It's always proven a kind of really interesting route to recruit. We've found great people, and you know, a lot of the senior people at Jamie's Farm have been through Teach First. We used to run away days for innovation partners, so we hosted for a number of years residentials for other senior members of staff at other Teach First aligned charities, or charities that had kind of come out of Teach First. So the likes of Frontline, Unlocked, Brilliant Club, etc. And we really enjoyed kind of hosting those guys, being part of that network. And I think from those interactions, a lot of interesting collaborations have grown. So we connect with lots of different Teach First charities, whether that's through supporting them with their work, or just using each other to kind of benchmark stuff, or share materials, or just kind of streamline how you get to a result, you know. So that's been really, really good. Also, right from the start, when I was working in recruitment at Teach First, I would cheekily mention Jamie's Farm as an idea to every new recruit I interviewed for Teach First, and that seemed to lodge somewhere. So in terms of new business and new schools, all of the early schools that came to Jamie's Farm came through Teach First, and nowadays a lot of our connections in schools are Teach First ambassadors, not least the Head Teachers Network. So we hosted around 30 heads for a full weekend. Heads Forward, I think you call it, is that right?
Yeah, Head Forward Network.
Yeah, and we hosted those guys, which was really, really great and lovely to connect with them. Lovely for us to hear about a perspective on what was happening on the ground in schools. But yeah, really exciting to kind of stay connected. And you know, Teach First has some real great can-do, exciting characters, and for us to be rubbing shoulders with those guys is always very refreshing. Certainly there are a number of Teach First ambassadors in the Southwest, not least some of them who were in my cohort and remain my best friends, but there are also lots of things happening in and around Bristol that we connect with.
No, that's brilliant. And also you've been part of sort of the innovation network in the past, is that right? And have you got any kind of examples of any collaboration work between that group and yourselves?
So I think a lot of like very practical support. So for example, connecting our head of finance with other heads of finance, talking to other CEOs. During those retreats, we did some really sort of great collaborative problem solving, where you'd sort of be put in a group and you'd take a challenge that you had in your organization, and you would use the other guys as a sounding board and help to come up with solutions. And that was just really, really valuable. And so, yeah, I think we've had a lot of support through that network, and it's been very valuable for us.
Yeah. And I guess, as we've been talking obviously about Teach First, there's obviously big celebration coming up, 20 years. Obviously this whole year is about celebrating 20 years of Teach First. So I was just curious what obviously 20 years of Teach First means to you. As you said, you kick-started, you were part of the original cohort, so original kind of trainee group, and it'd just be great to get your kind of reflections on what that means.
Yeah, so next Friday night at our Waterloo farm, we're hosting a 20-year reunion for the 03 cohort, which we feel, really, really excited about, seeing all those people and seeing where they've got to. For me, I credit Teach First with a lot in my life, really, not least my interesting and varied career. I'm extremely lucky in my current role and the variety of work I do, how stimulating it is. And I feel very kind of proud and honored to be part of that network and movement. And I feel like 20 years is a really good time to kind of look back, but also look forward, and to think very carefully about what the movement might bring to the world of education and beyond, and charity, etc., in this coming period. Because I feel like we're living in a time where there are a lot of deep wounds and some quite divided people post-COVID, for lots of other reasons as well. And I feel like kind of Teach First ambassadors getting their heads together on how to heal some of those, and to create a far more kind of optimistic and positive world, not least for young people. It's a really, really good opportunity and time to do that. And I can guarantee at that 20-year reunion that we're organising that there will be some amazing, energetic conversations happening about how to solve some of these problems.
Yeah, and I know obviously you having that reunion is going to be really great to kind of hear back from that and get some feedback as to how that kind of went, and what ideas everybody brings to the table, just so that we can understand how we can move forward for the next 10-20 years. I guess one tangent question as well for me, but related to obviously all of this in general, is like, for you, what's the best thing, like, in terms of supporting the students? Like, what if you could distill it down to like a sentence, how would you kind of describe how you feel about making this massive impact for the students?
I think it's a privilege to be witnessing transformation every week. Like, it's across our farms now. When we're up and running on 6, there'll be 300 visits, 300 weeks of transformation happening. And I think that we're extremely lucky to be in a hopeful environment with hopeful, optimistic staff sharing that hopeful message with students. So we're very, very lucky to be doing the work. And I feel, really optimistic about what those kids can do when they leave our farm gate.
No, that's so cool. And I love the every time I see different videos of sort of what James Farm are doing, like, hearing from yourself and others about what just impressive kind of ways that the kids can kind of transform and sort of their lives be changed in a small way or in a significant way. I just think that's an amazing achievement that yourself and the team have done over the years, and all from a concept that actually kick-started when you were on the training program, which is just it's just amazing, but mad at the same time as to how you've been doing it all. And yes, obviously we mentioned the fact that you've got your reunion, obviously marking kind of 20 years. We've obviously got the Great Ambassador Gathering happening on the 1st of July, which I understand sadly you can't be there for yourself, but your team are obviously going to be there with the Fringe stall. So come and make sure that you come and have a chat to the team, the Jamie's Farm team, and find out a little bit more. But otherwise, yeah, just thanks so much for having a chat with me today. And yeah, just always interested to hear more about the work that you're all doing, and can't wait to see what happens next in the future.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.